Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Women in Entertainment's In Her Words podcast. I'm Renee Rossi.
And I'm Gretchen McCourt.
And we're the co-founders of Women in Entertainment. Today, we hope you enjoy our upcoming episode with Paul Feig.
He is like our new best friend. We love Paul. He's so generous. He gives his time to women in entertainment. You guys know him from all of his successful projects, but he is a real champion for women.
And he's, on top of it, one of the most lovely people I've ever met, or we've ever met.
Yeah, funny, generous. We love having Paul as part of anything that we do.
So we hope you enjoy today's episode, and you can follow us at womeninentertainment.com, as well as on our social media, on Instagram and Twitter, and we hope you follow us and our journey.
So this is In Her Words, the Women in Entertainment podcast, and I am Gretchen McCourt, and this is my co-founder, Renee Rossi, and we're welcoming Paul Feig as our guest tonight. Paul, thank you so much for joining us on our podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
So we wanted to start off tonight in a little bit of a different direction. You are one of the most famous writers, directors out there working now, and we see a lot of stories and a lot of interviews about your projects. And tonight we want to talk about you and your journey, your career, just how you got started, and the people that have influenced you over the years.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's very, very kind of you, and it's great to be on here. I'm such a fan of women in entertainment, so thank you for having me.
Thank you. So I guess why don't we start and dive in? So Paul, one of the things when we were doing research for this that I was really surprised was that you started on Facts of Life. Like that was one of your that was one of your entry points. So,
Yeah.
when we're talking about mentorship or how you got your big break, why don't we start there? Why don't you tell us a little bit about just how you got into the industry and what that was like?
Yeah, I mean, if they go way back, I'm from Michigan, and I grew up in Detroit. My father was a retailer. He owned an Army surplus store, and my mom basically worked for my dad. And I was an only child, but always wanted to be in showbiz. It just was a calling I had since I was 5 years old into the school play, and got a lot of laughs and got addicted to the sound of laughter and making people laugh. And in Michigan, my dad eventually, when I was like 15 years old, let me start writing and directing and producing commercials for his store, which were those ridiculous, UHF, Crazy Eddie type commercials. And but I had fun, and it was very, I thought it was gonna make me a local celebrity. It didn't whatsoever. I remember thinking, wow, I'm gonna be so famous now, and some guy came to the store. He's like, hey, I saw you in those commercials. I said, oh, thank you very much. He said, I didn't say I liked them. He was like, okay, great. So that's the level of respect I got in Michigan entertainment. But eventually, became a stand-up comedian, moved out to California to be a tour guide at Universal Studios. While I was there, I discovered USC Film School, ended up going to USC Film School, got my degree there, but always wanted to go back into stand-up and to acting and into all that. That was always my dream. And so did stand up for 5 years professionally, and that's where some casting directors like Meg Lieberman saw me, and Allison Jones. And Meg Lieberman was the one who actually brought me in to do Facts of Life for just one episode, just a small guest star. But for me, it was a giant deal because. Yeah, it was a national TV show, and Cloris Leachman was on at the time, and I was a big fan of hers. And so and did it. And it was a ridiculous part. I mean, it was basically I was playing a nerd, and hard to believe. And then the episode I think was called "The Ratings Game," and it was all about the girls are rating people. That was back when it was popular to go. There's also 10 or an 8 or whatever. That was new. And the whole thing was like, they're going to have a party for hot guys and rate them all. But then, a couple of nerds show up, and they're twos. And it was actually a fairly humiliating to do. But again, it was national TV, so I was thrilled. And, and I'll always credit Meg Lieberman for giving me my break, because she brought me in early. She knows a stand-up. She didn't know if I could act or not. And so brought me in, coached me on how to do it. And then I ended up getting the part in front of the producers.
Oh, that's fantastic.
How old were you at that time?
I was 24, 25.
So after film school. And did you continue doing stand-up while you were, or did you want to move away from stand-up and into into acting completely?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to get out of stand-up. I was I wanted to be a stand-up comedian for all my childhood, and I would watch it. I was addicted to like Steve Martin and George Carlin and Lenny Bruce and all the old comedy records, and I really wanted to do that. But after 5 years of kind of doing it professionally, I realized it wasn't what I wanted to do the rest of my life. Because I didn't like going on the road, and I didn't like kind of
Mhm.
traveling around and being in a different city every week, and you didn't know who you were on the bill with and all that. So yeah, I was trying to transition out of acting, and so once I started getting these roles, that was my goal. Like, okay, I'm going to try to stop doing stand up and just do this. But this was in the '80s too. This is like the late '80s when all the sitcoms were being based on comedians like
Right.
Roseanne
Yeah.
and some of the others. But yeah, so it seemed like a stepping stone.
Well, and those huge comedy concerts, I can remember,
Yeah.
Eddie Murphy, and I mean, they were like
Yeah.
rock concerts that music concerts, they were so huge, those comedy concerts at that time.
Yeah, it was gigantic. I mean, that was really before even kind of cable came in and was doing a lot of comedy specials, and then streaming sort of took that over. And, they're still popular, but that was the comedy club boom back then. It was huge in the '80s.
Yeah. Have you like when did you stop doing stand up? When did you transition completely out of stand up? Because I know that
I,
we've talked previously and just talked a little bit about how stand up has informed your directing as well as you as an actor. So I would love to just talk a little bit about that just because that was super interesting.
yeah, I mean, I really started making the hard transition out in '89, and
Okay.
then by '90, I was out. Ironically, I did my last performance and then was acting, but then finally got asked to be on the show called Evening of the Improv, which was a big deal back then. And so went and did it after I'd stopped doing stand up for like months. And if you ever see the tape, which I think is out there, it's you can tell it's somebody who
It's
had
on
lost the
YouTube.
muscle. Oh, God. It's not me at my best. That was me kind of like trying to catch up on having not done it for 3 months. Like, it's a real muscle stand up.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
if you don't do it every night, you start to, you lose it a little bit.
So in terms of just what you've learned from improv, and your start, how does that inform how you approach your writing, your directing? Because improv, it's, from other guests and some, other folks that have done improv that we've heard, improv is really scary. I feel like at
Well,
least for the common person, it's very scary.
yeah, well, it's funny. Stand up and improv are one of those professions or art forms that most people go, "Oh my God, I could never do that. How could
Yeah.
you do that?" But I always say, if you've got the ego to want to do it,
Yeah.
it's not. It's
Uh,
almost you're driven to do it.
Okay.
You have to have that ego to do it. If you don't have that ego, you'll get shot down the first time you get up and a joke doesn't work.
Yeah.
So it instills a weird level of confidence, sometimes overconfidence, but you kind of need that, going into this business. This business is such a mix of artistry, talent, but self promotion and ego to push yourself through all the terrible times you're going to have, because you are going to have terrible times. There's going to be tons of
Yeah.
rejection, and you either handle it by like, "Oh my gosh, I'm terrible," or, "Well, they didn't get me." That was most stand-ups, will come off like, "Oh, the terrible set. The audience was terrible,"
Yeah.
because you have to blame it on someone. Because you do the same set, and whether you're a little off or not, you don't know. It's just some
Yeah.
audiences buy it, and other audiences, the exact same set will just kind of bomb. And so you do get this thick skin, which you take into what I do now in the storytelling and
Yeah.
filmmaking,
mhm.
because you have to get to know an audience. It's the best training ground, doing stand up and improv, but stand up even more so than improv, because you are writing an act. You're not getting up and
Yeah.
just making up an act, and so you get to learn the ins and outs and the what audiences need, and when they need a break, and when you got to bring them up and take them down. So you're really structuring your act kind of like a movie at the end of the day.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was really interesting yesterday, or when we were prepping, cut that, that what you took
Mm.
from your highs and lows and learnings and pivoting in your improv, and stand-up work, and how it informs your writing, and how you seem to let your projects kind of develop themselves because you're comfortable in that. What's the
Yeah.
audience gonna react to? What's the cast reacting to? And how do we pivot as we go in the writing and the directing?
Yeah, well, that's why I'm so addicted to test screenings, because for me, that's where the only place you really tell what's going to work and what's not going to work. And, through development and everything, obviously you're going off your own instinct and off the people that you rely on to kind of give you feedback. But once it's together, that's when you have to put it in front of an audience, because I can sit around all day and tell you what's funny and not funny,
Yeah.
and my producers can go, "That's funny," and take that joke out. But
Mhm.
until it's in front of an audience, if they laugh, then I go, "Okay, case closed. That's funny." And if they don't, then I can't defend it, and they go, "All right, let's take it out and put in another joke." So it's really helpful, and I'm really glad I had that experience to take into making commercial movies. If you're making an independent film, I have personal feelings that I think every movie should be tested, just because you do want to make sure you're pleasing the audience, and there's things you just have blind spots about,
Mhm.
that you think is great, and an audience will give you feedback, even if it's you're not looking for a laugh. They'll go like, "That was boring," or "I didn't like that," or "I didn't understand that." And I would say
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing you learn from test screenings is, "I didn't get this," because there's no defense against that. You can't go, "Well, you're dumb." It's like, no, they didn't get it. Like, if
Yeah.
they didn't get it, they didn't get it, and it's up to you to make sure that they do get it.
How early do you test screen in your projects? How big of changes can you still make when you're out in front of an audience?
Quite a few. I mean, unless I'm like the last movie I did, The School for Good and Evil, which was so special effects driven,
Mhm.
it
Yeah.
took longer to get to a test screening because we couldn't show stuff in embryonic form.
Mhm.
But in general, when I'm making a movie that's not VFX heavy, I'll 5 or 6 weeks into my director's cut, we'll start doing a test just to see what I've got,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because you do your first couple passes and go like, I think this is good. So once you get there, then you're just kind of shuffling, not on the Titanic, but you're shuffling, deck chairs around until you go, let's just show it to people. But I also have a real thing with, I don't do friends and family screenings. I found early
Oh,
in my
interesting.
career,
Yeah.
I found them to be absolutely worthless. They're
Right.
they're almost
Yeah.
they're almost destructive, because oh my God, everybody loves that. It's like, but they're your friends, they're your family, they
Yeah.
know you, so they know, oh, that was good because that's not normally how that person thinks. And so they have too much insider information. When you put it up
Yeah.
in front of an audience of people who have no idea who you are,
Yeah.
they're brutal, but you need them to be brutal, because the audiences are going to be brutal no matter what.
Do you do them outside of LA? When I was at ArcLight, I would beg to have research screenings at ArcLight. They were like, "No, you
Yeah.
have to."
Yeah, no, I mean, anything within the boundaries of LA, you just know you're going to get people who are in the business, who want to be in the business, who want to sound smart about the business.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So it almost feels like you got an audience full of film students. And, when people start using really technical terms in the focus group, you're like, okay, all
You're like,
right.
"We need to go to Omaha. We're
Yeah,
out."
totally, totally. She really found that like Woodland Hills is sort of my favorite place to test,
Okay.
because it's LA, but it's might as well be 1,000 miles away
Right.
from LA.
Yeah.
Then you
Right.
get a really great, diverse, crowd too, which is lovely.
That's fun.
Yeah. So in terms of, why don't we transition a little bit? In terms of your writing, I know when we were talking, you have a really unique perspective of writing and what you expose yourself to, in terms of other projects that are going on, or if people send you scripts that you don't really read them while you're in the thick of writing, which I thought
Yeah.
was really interesting, especially for our audience. Our community are so many up and comers that are trying to figure out, how do I get this, script in front of certain people, or how do I write this character? And I thought you had such many unique perspectives, around character development. So I'd love to just explore that with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's I'm always nervous about recycling something I've seen,
Yeah.
and not even consciously, like unconsciously,
Yeah.
and so that's why I know so many people, especially directors, more than writers, but when they're like getting ready to do a project, they'll immerse in movies of the genre and kind of really
Yeah.
study them. I kind of, the minute I want to do something, whether you either write it or direct in a genre, I go like, I don't want to see anything from that. I've seen them before, so they're in my head.
Yeah.
I know they're there, but I want to kind of go like, what's my original take on that, and not the influence. And it's going to happen no matter what. When
Yeah.
you're writing, a character in any genre, they're making decisions, based on the story that you've kind of set up. And it's very easy to go, oh, and then they would do this. And you're like, well, wait, would they do that? Or is that just something I've seen characters do in movies all the time? And so that's why I always think you have to be related, kind of related to your characters and that they are
Yeah.
part of you. So
Mhm.
that you go like, well, what would I do? And a lot of times you'll 90% of the time you'll come up with something that you haven't seen before because it's just authentic to what your take on the world is.
Interesting.
Yeah, and you touched on something that I think, again, our audience you don't write from event to event
Yeah.
Yeah.
and try to fill in between. Can you talk a little bit about that you letting
Yeah.
the characters go in a pivot to the direction they would go?
Yeah, I'm really afraid of plots that are event driven because I find that, and that's, I think, what most people, including myself, when you're coming up with an idea of like, oh, it's this story, and then these things would happen in the story. And then you're going, okay, now I got to plug and play my characters into these events. And I would much rather kind of come up with the character first. Like, I know the genre I want to work in, or I want the general story or what I want to say. But if I'm then if I'm plotting events without character, then I'm already at a loss, because then it's not, the emotion is not there. I'm trying to stuff emotion into it and stuff the reality of character choices into it versus, okay, here's the thing I want to do. Who are the characters I want in this, and who's my main character especially, but who are the main players I want in this? What are they based on? What in my life do I relate to them? How do I kind of let the story represent what they're going through? So it's really about like, what is going to be the best story for my character to go through, to have the epiphany, to have the change of heart, to have the realization and the betterment that I want them to have. Again, I think if you go from character, and I love doing that, like okay, what's the character I want to do? And like, oh, this is based on somebody I knew, or this is based on me at a certain age going through this relationship or going through something. And then go, okay, now what story would serve them the best and give them the best obstacles to go through their reaction should create the events that then drive the movie. And so that's why I'll outline sometimes I won't outline a story if I have a real strong idea of where it's going to go and how it's going to end, because then I'd rather have the characters in the situation and have them make a decision or something they say that then turns the story sideways, creates the next event. So they're not just reacting to an event, they are actually creating the events, or their reaction is showing you, oh, this event should happen to them because now this will take them to the next place I need them to go.
Okay. Do you write characters with certain people in mind? As you're, obviously you're putting yourself in them, and I think you've worked with some incredible women. Do you ever, create those characters for those women? Or do you go into it thinking, wow, this is a character I really want this person to play?
I find that when I go, oh, I want to write something for so and so, even though it's kind of the inspiration, it starts to left turn from them because I don't want to be pinned down to any set personality.
Yeah.
Even though I know what they can do, I think what it is I know they're talented. And so I go, okay, I don't need to make this them because they can become this person.
Yeah.
And it allows me not to get pigeonholed into certain things. And also, I just have no idea if that person's going to end up wanting to do it. I mean, I've had things I've written for people where I said, this is for you. We've talked about it, all this stuff. I finish it. And then they're like, I don't think I want to do that now. I'm going to do something else. And I've always been able to go like, okay, I've been able to like slot somebody else into it and not have to change it as much as I would think I would, because it's a little more universal as far as a character and not so specific to a certain person.
Okay.
What about the size of the cast? I was just thinking about how we mentioned, School for Good and Evil. I mean, that's just so many characters and so many people.
Yeah.
But when I think about Bridesmaids, which is a
Yeah.
big, huge comedy, but it's really not a lot of people and not a lot of different characters. There's the 5 or 6 core. Do you try to rein it in, or do you have things where it's like, I need more than 2 people in this movie? You have
Right.
to grow or rein it in.
Well, ensembles are fun. I really like ensembles because you get so many, extra kind of voices and all that. But you always have to face an ensemble still with a protagonist. and an antagonist. And then everybody is kind of, I don't want to say window dressing, that sounds too diminutive, but they are in service of your main character. I mean, Bridesmaids was a great example, Kristen and Annie's great script of how those bridesmaids around them represented different aspects of marriage and of love. And so that's what you need to go make sure, like, okay, what do they all stand for? What's their input to my main characters going to be, and how's it going to be conflicting, and how's it going to kind of send them on a journey, or put them through an ordeal. And but it's really, our focus was on Kristen's character, Annie, and her journey. I mean, it's funny, like, people go always like, everybody wants a sequel to Bridesmaids. But I'm always like, it's not as easy as it sounds, because the reason that movie works, you remember all the window dressing of the dress shop and the airplane and all that, but it's because she's in a real crisis. We meet this really confident woman at a low point in her life when she's lost all her confidence. And this crisis of losing her best friend sends her through the fire, and she comes out the other side stronger and sort of back to who we wanted her to be. So to do a sequel is like, well, she can't go through the fire again. So, so it can be, obviously plots can be done, but that's why I like first, I haven't done a lot of sequels, because it's more fun to kind of, here's a person, here's the situation they're in, let's fix this person. That to me is the fun of storytelling.
Yeah, versus another adventure for that person. And what about the other side? Have you had projects where you felt like you've needed to add people, where it's just like gets through it and it's almost too small?
I mean, it depends really. There's definitely projects where I kind of go like, oh, I wish I had some more side characters, just so there's more for my main people to play off of. But it really, the story will tell you what you need. And I at the end of the day, I'd probably rather have less characters than more, as long as I can service what my main character needs through the people they're with. I mean, a desert island story could be fantastic if, the person they're with is interesting, and then the conflict is enough that you can send them on a journey. It's really just, how do you send a person on a character on a journey, and hold the audience's attention for an hour and a half, 2 hours, however long your movie is.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's interesting. Do you find that projects come at certain points of your life that are meant to be? Like, when you look at when Freaks and Geeks came out, and when you look at, it's like you've been part of historic cultural zeitgeist type shows and films. So when you look back right now, do you see certain, I know there's a huge cult following for Freaks and Geeks, and people want you to reprise that,
Right.
Do you look at it and say it was perfect at the time that it was? Or do you look at it like, I could, that magic and that lightning in a bottle could happen now?
I always have the imposter syndrome. You're like, oh wow, we got away with that one. Don't even try to do it again. But I mean, honestly, I think I spent most of my career waiting for that, like, aha moment, especially as a writer, mostly as a writer, actually, because that's, Freaks and Geeks was kind of an aha moment for me. Bridesmaids, even though I didn't write it, was just sort of finding it and like relating to it. Spy was definitely an aha moment for me. That was just kind of like, I was in the post-production on The Heat. And, I'd always wanted to direct a James Bond movie, when like, well, they're never going to let me direct a James Bond movie. It was like, wait, I don't know these funny women. I'm going to write my own, version, and put a very personal story through it, which was the kind of the story when I did The Heat, and how insecure I felt kind of stepping out on my own to make that, with not having Judd that I was working with and stuff. And so I kind of processed that through the character, and finding, how Susan finds her confidence and all that. So, but that's why I think those ones you really latch into, you're so personally involved with that character and what they're going through. But then if you then find a genre or a bigger story to put them through with tropes that then you can have fun with and use to affect that character, that's sort of like nirvana, if you can find that. But it's hard to find it. I always, every time I think, in the last number of years, like, oh, it's these two things, and you work on them and go like, oh, it's not there. Like, and I'm very big on like, I think you catch that wave, and then I've had scripts where if the wave isn't there, you may eventually figure it out, but sometimes it's just like, what, if that wave isn't there, look for the next wave.
Yeah.
We switch to shift to mentoring,
Yeah.
mentorship. So you,
Mentorship.
some of the breaks that you've mentioned and the people are still with you, like Allison and Meg, that you mentioned were so important in your career, and that you're still working with. With your success, I can't imagine how many people want to be part of your circle and want you to mentor. How do you balance that? Like making sure you're working with your best people and that you love and to work with, but you're allowing these new talents and these new voices to come in and to have a chance. How do you balance
Yeah.
that?
Well, I mean, we have our company, Powder Keg, which
Mm-hmm.
is really set up for that. I wanted, realized years ago, I get tired of my voice. I get tired of the voices that are out there doing a lot of stuff all the time. And I see how the representation, how it was so bad and still is struggling to, it's slowly getting better, but it's still taking a while, and just wanted to, I had mentored a lot, and have people follow me on the set and stuff, but I always felt sort of like I would just kind of, okay, here's how I do it, and all right, and good luck to you, and so that's why we started Powder Keg, to be able to bring people in who we thought were talented, wanted to take a chance on, gave them a chance to see if they could actually do it. We have this, our main thing is this program called Powder Keg Fuse, where each year we fund like 5 to 6 short films where we put the word out about what the topic we're looking for is, and then a lot of people will submit, and we're all about female filmmakers of color, LGBTQ, pretty much anybody who doesn't have a voice, a voice in Hollywood, and we want to see what they're going to bring to it. So we go through all this stuff and have a great team at Powder Keg who really goes through tons of stuff. And we find these things that are compelling, people with an interesting voice. And then we're able to, each person has a $10,000 budget. They have to shoot it in one day. And, and they do. And what comes of that is we get to see how they do, and they get to prove themselves. And it's not just, by the time it's done, I can safely say this person is good. I saw what they can do. Look at what they did. Here's their calling card, and I will advocate for them because I know what they can do, and I saw them do it. So, so anything to do to create new voices, but I think you have to give opportunity, and that's say in this business, people who have any kind of powers. Power's a weak word because nobody really has any powers, but whoever's to create opportunity has to do it to find those new voices, because they're not going to get found any other way, and they're not going to have a chance to prove themselves.
And is this the 4th year for Powder Keg?
Yeah, we just finished our 3rd round.
Okay.
Those are all getting finished up. Actually, one was just played in Sundance to a great response. So so we're
amazing.
Very proud. Yeah.
And that's for our audience, we do have a lot of students and we do have a lot of people starting out. What is your advice on incubators and on projects like this? Do you recommend that they're submitting and they're trying, all the different festivals have it, and then individuals that those are great opportunities?
Totally. I mean, but definitely, but don't rely on them. You know what I mean? I mean, submit to those. I think you got to scatter everything everywhere, in order for anything to happen. But also don't fall in the trap of like sitting around waiting for that to validate you or to get that opportunity, because when I made my first feature film back in 1997, I put all my money into it. I wrote this movie. It was a feature-length film about 4 people moving in a field. It took place in one day. They thought a UFO was going to show up, and they didn't know why each other was there, and they kind of worked it out during the day. So, I said, what's the cheapest movie I can make? Okay, 4 people in a field, one day. That's it. So that movie still cost me $35,000 because I had to get, Super 8, or not Super 8, 16 millimeter film and all the processing. And so it was all that. Today, with this, your phone, you can shoot something that looks 1,000 times better than what I shot on 16 millimeter. You can edit it in your computer, and you can make your own calling cards as you're waiting for other people to let you make a calling card. But the days of just saying I can't do it because I don't have the money or I need somebody to help me out, those are gone. I mean, you can't fall back on that anymore.
When you look back on your career, what was, I think one of the things that we constantly talk about are our successes. When you look back on your career, are there moments that, you're like, man, that put me on a completely different path, or a failure or a challenge that, a mentor really helped you through? Or was there, how did you approach those types of situations? Because as you said earlier, it's a tough business.
Yeah, no, you get knocked down constantly. I
Yeah.
mean, I had enough breaks that it kept me going. But again, I was not going to allow myself not to be in the business. I didn't know. I didn't know if I was on the right path. I didn't know if I was exactly, my goal originally was I wanted to be write, direct, star in my own movies. That was
Yeah.
my thing. And pursued that in the movie I made that I talked about that cost $35,000. I was the star. And I was the weakest part of the movie,
Yeah.
like people liked the movie that saw it and stuff, but had to be wise enough to go like, you know what, if I got myself out of that film and just did everything else I did, it would have been a better movie.
Yeah.
And but it was a big moment for me, and I actually had like a real epiphany in the middle of that, because I'd always been kind of afraid of being a director before that, just
Right.
because I was afraid of the responsibility and all that. And I was in the middle of my second day shooting, and I was way behind. And my AD was a very nice guy, but he was being very hard on me. So friend, I don't think thought I could do it, and he was pretty professional. And I had this one moment right in the middle of the day, and he goes, "We're right behind. What are we going to do?" And I thought I was going to have a panic attack, and so I was like, "All right, give me a second." We're walking away. I walked away. I remember saying, "If I could just pull the plug right now and just send everybody home, nobody's going to know. I'm paying for this, And I remember thinking, like, if I don't fix this right now, I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to do this in my life, because I will have bailed out on this one, the hard moment." I remember saying, "All right." Came back, said, like, "Here's what we're going to do. We're going to catch up. I have this big scene. It's like 5 pages of dialogue. I'm going to shoot it as a one." And, and we just did this big scene. It wasn't great, but I did it, got us back on schedule. Was able to say to him, "See, I'm on schedule." And really got this confidence from that, of just like, I didn't back down, because I had so many times in my life as a kid, or as a scared teenager, I would kind of extract myself from a difficult situation. So that was a real key moment for me. And then there's other moments, like, when I wrote Freaks and Geeks, and that, I was at a real low point when I did that, because that movie, the $35,000 movie I made, I couldn't get in any film festivals. I kind of bankrupted my wife and I by putting all my money into that, and the job that I had on Sabrina the Teenage Witch, they ended up not bringing me back, so I lost that income. And it was only out of desperation. I was always writing something, but I wrote
Yeah.
what my friend Matt Reeves had co-created Felicity with J.J. Abrams. And I remember watching that, going like, "Oh, like an hour-long drama. That seems like a cool way to tell stories." And I always wanted to tell a story about all the kids I knew in high school, and who I was, and and that I never saw portrayed, and wrote the pilot for Freaks and Geeks. And that was like a game changer, because I sent it to Judd Apatow, who was, we were stand-ups together, and he had just signed a deal at DreamWorks, because he was coming off of the Larry Sanders Show, and he loved the pilot and bought it, and and then we sold it at NBC, and then that changed everything for me, honestly.
Wow.
That's a cool story.
Yeah, that's an amazing story.
One of the things that you had brought up in the past is just, you don't have a lot of shots, in terms of making your impression, and your referrals in the business and so forth. I'd love to just have you talk a little bit about that, as to, are you going to pass along this project, or pass along this script? I think our audience, I think everybody wants to help each other out so much that there needs to also be boundaries, and healthy boundaries.
Yeah, well, as I always say, like your reputation is all you have in this
Yeah.
business. It really, and I made a few mistakes early on where I wanted to help somebody out, and I just
Yeah.
okay, sure, and I knew they weren't ready, or I knew that the thing they gave me wasn't good enough, but I was kind of well, I'll just pass it to the next person, and I'll let them down or tell them it's not good, and that's forget it because the minute you do that, people are like, you think this is good? Well, no, but maybe you don't like it. It's like if you don't like it, I'm not going to like it.
Yeah.
So it's a real slippery slope. So that's the biggest thing. And even when I'm telling people to take your cell phone and make films and just start doing it, you should start doing it because you have to learn, you have to make mistakes, but at the same time, be careful putting stuff out there just because you did it, show it to people, and again, it goes against my friends and family thing, but in the beginning, just show it to anybody and say, be honest on, be brutal on this, or get their friends together, you go put together people I don't know and just show this thing, because you don't have to be hard on your work, because if you just kind of say it's great because you did it, or even you're going like, I don't know if there's any good, let's take a look, the internet is a dangerous thing because once it's out there, everybody can see it. And so, the downside is you put something out and everybody goes like, oh my God, watch this. It's so terrible. So you do have to be kind of hard on yourself in that way and allow yourself to learn. So that you're always putting your best foot forward, even if your, best foot's obviously going to get better as you go. And, we all look at stuff we did in the past and go like, okay, that could have been better. But, there's also stuff we've done that we go like, if anybody saw that, it's so terrible that, I don't know if they're going to give me a shot.
Do you feel that audiences have changed a lot since you started, or how have they changed? I know, you're known for comedy. How have senses of humor changed, of your audience?
Yeah, comedy's is in a weird place right now because people are, 10 years ago, people were really into just like comedy, like the movie is crazy and it's funny. It always had to have character. You had to be based in the characters and the stakes of those characters and the emotional journey, but still it was cool to just go like, this is just a flat out comedy I'm watching. Audiences have gotten really weird about that in the last number of years. And it's really become more about mixed genre and like sneaking the comedy in. I mean, that's I think so much horror is doing so well right now because people who make horror movies laugh all the time. I'm just gonna say that, like because it's really fun and funny to make an audience jump or to have an audience on edge because you're so in control of it, that so there is, and if you look, a lot of scary movies are kind of funny, even the fact that sometimes they're just so absurd. That is a form of comedy in itself. And so, that's where I think comedy is right now is this mixed genre. I would say that Simple Favor is probably one of my favorite comedies I ever made, but nobody knew it was a comedy at the time. But then we do test audiences and like they'd be laughing the whole time, but then also on the edge of their seat and they'd be scared by something. And that's the nice thing about comedy is all about getting a very visceral reaction. And so is horror, and so is thrillers, and that kind of thing. You're going for the same thing, which is like making people jump or be surprised or have an extreme reaction, which then they'll always laugh. I mean, that's the thing. Anytime the audience screams, the next thing they do is they laugh. I'm always amazed. Like if you see two people like run across the street and almost get hit by cars, watch them when they get to the other side. They don't panicking. They're like looking at each other, like laugh, like, oh, we survived that. It's just a natural instinct. So I always find it's so much fun to go like, how can we get like 3 responses out of an audience at the same time?
Do you find when you're on set, because you've worked with some incredible women, Goldie Hawn, Amy Schumer, Melissa McCarthy, do they come up with their own jokes? Like how do they incorporate when they're like ad hocly like running a scene?
Well, everybody's different, I mean, you're working with Melissa, and Melissa's just, like a joke machine, but all coming out of character too. So she loves to surprise me, but then I like to surprise her, and so it's very symbiotic. It's kind of it's the biggest thing for me is to create an atmosphere, an environment where they can do that. There's so many writer directors, especially I know I've talked to actors who would be in their projects and go like, that must have been fun. It's like, no, it was terrible because they wouldn't let me deviate from the script because, my least favorite words that I hear from like writer directors, like, I worked 3 years on that line. You're going to say it like the way I wrote it. It's like, yeah, well, I don't care if you worked 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Now you're with a talented person who has to interpret it. Maybe they got a different idea or they got something they want to add to it. I'm a believer. Sure, you got to get the script as scripted, but I'm even less kind of care about that because I just want those lightning in a bottle moments. And so, every performer is different. When I worked with Anna Kendrick, and Anna is brilliant at like giving you different performances of the same line. Like she didn't love like don't throw a million jokes at me. Let's concentrate on this, and I get just as much variety out of her by her doing that because this take is really a goofy take, this take is a really serious, this one's really manic, and it's fantastic. So all I ever ask out of any actors I work with is just let me create variety either through what you're doing or let me get it from you. But one thing I don't do is I don't rehearse. Because I find if I just go like, let's just set up the camera, let's get, we know where we want to be. We kind of got our blocking. Even when we do the blocking, it's like, don't just show me where you're going to go. I don't do it because I've had so many times where you do a rehearsal, like it's brilliant. And you're like, oh, well, we didn't shoot that. It's never as good. So what I find is like we get the actors in there, they do their first take. A lot of times, like I'm like, that's completely not what I thought it should be and what I wanted at all. But I don't tell them that. And I just go like, okay, well, try this. And I slowly adjust them each take to what I think I want. And by the time, then that'll take like 8, 9, 10 takes to incrementally get to this different place. And I find almost every time I get to the one that I thought I wanted, it's not what I wanted anymore. I go like, the idea I had wasn't as good as what was coming out of this kind of creative moment in this talented person interpreting my words or the words of the writer. And that's exciting because then I get to the editing room and I've got this whole array of levels that I could pop in and out. And then, then on top of that, add in, try different jokes, and they're surprised with a joke. And then I sometimes have writers on the set and they're handing me jokes on Post-it notes. So, it's a long way to say like we kind of all we do is kind of feed the editing room at the end of the day by getting a whole range of everything out of the actor so that then we can, the thing I would say on the set is, generally shoots go really well. And every take, and people love it. And the studio loves the dailies, and they're excited, and it's going really well. And I'm always going like, I just hope it adds up. And it's kind of the truest thing about filmmaking is the moments can all be great, and they can add up to be terrible, like a terrible whole. And so that's why you have to go like, I have to have all these different levels because what I think is going to work, I don't know if it's going to work or not.
Okay. One of the things, now you've worked with a lot of incredible women. You've been known to work with incredible women and write these incredible stories for women. And you once said that you feel that there were so many poor roles for women and that women were relegated to a 15-year-old boy's image of what women can be.
Yeah.
Was there a pivotal point or a role or something that you saw that you were like, wow, this is just terrible. Like, I have to fix this.
It was cumulative. It came from as a kid, I would watch movies from the 30s and the 40s with my mom, and these screwball comedies and stuff. And the men and the women were really evenly matched, and they were, snapping things off at each other and, taking each other down in different ways, verbal volleys and all that stuff. And that was so exciting to me. And so then I would, growing up in the 70s and then, coming of age in the 80s and all that, watch these movies and go, oh God, like the women's parts are terrible. Like, all the guys are having the great time and they're being cool and all this stuff. And then, here are the women kind of either, what always made me the maddest was the wife who doesn't understand, It's always like some hero, and there was always those obligatory scenes. You're from the family and you're out, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, well, what a terrible character for this woman, because either she doesn't realize her husband's saving the world, and so she's just a drag, and we're all going like, oh, boo her, and it's just like, why is this happening? Why am I watching women being relegated to these sort of, terrible roles, and then comedy put it on top of it. Here's the beautiful, unattainable, or perfect girl who loves sports, who loves whatever other, they're trying to create these perfect women, for nerdy dudes. And so that was boring. Or you'd see them be the mean wife, or the mean girlfriend. Honestly, Rachel Harris, I love, and I think she's so funny. And I remember, I love the movie The Hangover. I think it's one of the most brilliant comedies of all time. But her character is so terrible in that movie because she's just mean. And I go like, Rachel's hilarious, like in real life. Like, why'd she got to be this shrew? And that really kind of bugged me. And then when I saw School of Rock, another brilliant movie. But I love Sarah Silverman. She's so funny, and she's like a mean girlfriend in that. And I'm just like, well, why doesn't she get to be funny like Jack Black and everybody else? And that stuff just started to drive me crazy. And it's just like, I know, especially knowing those people personally, you're like, I want you to be funny. And so they just was like, it'd been something I wanted to do anyway, because I was close with my mom and all my friends were girls when I was growing up. So I always related more to those stories anyway. And then he had to go through this period of, trying to sell stuff and try to develop male-oriented kind of stories. And I always felt like an imposter because, I'm the guy that did Freaks and Geeks. I only relate to the geeks, really. And, kind of related to the freaks just because they were outsiders too, but they were cooler than us. But, so it all kind of added up to just wanting to do this and create really three-dimensional roles for all the talented women out there.
We all thank you.
Yes,
Well,
exactly. We've enjoyed all of them.
Everybody. No, it's fun.
So as we've talked about, how comedy is, how audiences have changed, and how these roles for women have changed in especially these last couple of years on the business side of things, with all of the different outlets and the streaming services and the theaters changing. And do you see that is that changing for the creative community? It feels like, are things getting, are they moving faster? Are there more outlets? How have all of those other pieces add up and help the business to change?
Well, I think it's been great because it creates so much more opportunity. There's so many more outlets. We always used to be fighting over a few movie studios and a few TV, and networks and all that. And now I think it's almost going too far. I'm glad because I want everybody to be working, but I can now, we're feeling now people are starting to rein it back in because it was doing so much stuff. But thank goodness, that it got to go so far. And I think it'll keep going far because people just need good stuff. And what we're seeing is so much good stuff. I don't know about you, but like there's so many things still on my watch list that I can't get to that I know are great. But how great, having grown up in the 70s when TV was pretty universally terrible,
Right.
To go, wow, it's so nice that there's this meritocracy of great stuff out there. So I think it's great, and it's created a lot more opportunity for voices that don't normally get out there. It still we've got a long way to go, but it should be celebrating. But the fact that at least it's kind of happening now, and I just hope it doesn't backslide. Because we've seen these things backslide before, right? When you think about the 70s and the women's movement, it's like, okay, we're moving forward, and then suddenly, backslid. So this feels different to me now, I have to say, it just because there are more real opportunities that are happening, but again, not enough. It's we just saw from the directing nominations today that we're still not going in totally in the right direction.
So do we want to finish up our, I
Yeah.
can't believe
I
we're
was
at
like,
the end of our
we're
time
fine.
already. It goes
Oh
so
no!
fast. I know.
Because I talk too much. That's what it is.
No, never. We could talk for
We
hours.
talk for hours. We have thousands of questions for you.
Yeah,
Oh
exactly.
yeah.
So do we want to finish up with we're trying to establish our women, our in her words final question or final story. So do we have a
excellent.
blooper question? Do we want to? Yeah.
Our question is, what was your life blooper? Like, what was like a funny time for you, or a blooper in your life that just changed who you were?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's a good one and a tough one. There's been so many bloopers. Sadly, that's the gosh. Trying to think. There's been so many terrible times.
I hope
Wow,
not.
Bloopers are funny.
My biggest blooper is really it's just an overarching thing, which is I'm such an optimist. I've always been my whole life, and because when you're an optimist, all you do is get knocked down. Because you wake up in the morning like today's the day, it's going to be great, you know, and it very rarely happens. And so you just get pilloried and knocked down, and there's bullies. When I was a kid, it's bullying and bullied there, and I don't know, people just want to beat you up, and and you embarrass yourself in front of whoever you like at the time and all that, and you screw up your homework or you mess up the test, and you just get knocked down. And by the end of the day, I was just kind of crawl in the bed like, oh my gosh, that didn't work. But then the next day you wake up and you're like, today's the day. Today's going to be great. So, it's in a bad way to be an optimist because all you can do is get knocked down. But I would not want to be anything other than an optimist because I never want to get up and go like, forget it. It's all, you need to have that, whether you're driven by ego, optimism, just pure will to make something good happen and not want to believe that the world is unfair and terrible, then I think that's a great thing. So it creates many, many bloopers in your life. But at the same time, there's no kind of better way to be, because then you're just you're a happier person, even though because you learn how to absorb the blows, and you kind of are able to bounce back and you have to find a way to bounce back. Like giving up is just, then there's nothing. The minute you give up, it's all over. So it shouldn't be over because there's just too much. I don't want to say opportunity out there. There's too much opportunity to create for yourself, and that's why so many people kind of rely on the business. And you can't do that. Like it's like dating. It's like, I went through when I was trying to find a girlfriend at the time. And every time I'd like, she's the one, and you just be so desperate and falling apart and make an idiot of yourself and like go too far and give gifts or try to whatever, like try to impress the person, and you're so desperate, like they just smell it on you, and it doesn't work. And the minute I went like, you know what, forget it. I'm going to be a bachelor. I'm better off on my own. I was an only child to do it. And like a week later, I met my wife, and now we've been married for almost 30 years. So, because like I just kind of dropped the facade and the desperation. And I think that's what you have to do in this business. You just have to like be so driven to do what you want to do, be able to pivot. If you can't make this, then maybe do this. And maybe it's something that's completely different. You're making stuff on Etsy that's super cool. But like, if you make it as pure, people will find it, and then that will open up the opportunity for you to then go, and I also do this, or to be kind of move what you do into something else, and just keep inventing and reinventing and being excited about that thing inside you that is your voice, that you want to tell your stories or your take on the world, or just put your attitude out into the world, and so never lose that.
If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe and leave a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. To stay up to date with In Her Words, join the conversation by following Women in Entertainment on our social channels and subscribe to our weekly newsletter at womeninentertainment.com.